Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So many of you tuning in. I'm reading that we have some people on the East Coast, some on the West Coast. We have Paris joining with us. I love Paris. Hello from Montreal. Let me know in the chat if you guys can hear me. I'm going to go back to sitting. I was standing up last night and teaching. And I think it's going to look better with watercolor because there's so much going on with my palette and the water cups and the paper. I can hear you well. All right, so John mentioned this up further in the chat, but if there's any sort of buffering going on with your video, there are a lot of people on YouTube these days because we're all wanting to learn some art or whatever. So you may need to lower the quality of your video by going to the gear icon and lowering it to like 720p or 480p and try that. And then if that's still not working, just scroll back about 10 to 30 seconds. And so you won't be watching it live, but the video has time to catch up. So if that happens for you, just some troubleshooting for you to do on your own end. Because it's working fine for us over here. It just might be because YouTube is a little overloaded with all the people on its platform right now. Finally made it to a live one. Yay. All right. So I'll be able to answer questions here and there. I'll poke back over to the chat with my eyeballs, but my team, Kelly and John, are on the chat as well. So they'll be fielding questions and answering questions on my behalf, but I'll look over every once in a while. And then we'll also do a Q&A at the end. But this is day 4, the final day of JR Art School. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to teach you guys color theory. There's a lot we're going to cover today. So to get started, let's just talk about supplies. If you guys are ready, we're going to get really, really colorful today and basically just get into all things color mixing, color harmonies and relationships, and how to know what colors to choose when you're painting, etc. So let me know if you're excited in the chat and we'll get started. So to get started, I guess if you didn't watch day 1 of the, JR Art School, then you probably missed the supplies that I'll be using, but I always use the same supplies for all of my watercolor work. So today I'm going to be working with the same paper I always work with, which is by Legion paper. It's their Stonehenge Aqua cold press. And I paint in a block of paper. So it's glued on all 4 sides of the paper to keep it from warping, to prevent it from warping and bending and buckling. And there's just one little area, it's about 1 inch long, that isn't glued. And so I can lift off the top sheet when I'm done with it. And then it's cold pressed, so it has a nice toothy texture to it that helps to keep the pigment and water in place as I'm painting, which is amazing. If you are working with watercolor and you like to use a lot of water. Hot press is another type of watercolor paper. A lot of watercolor artists have a lot of success with hot press paper, but I just prefer the toothy, bumpy texture of cold press paper. So that's why I work in cold press. I have my main Traveler's palette. Again, all of these supplies are linked in the description below, by the way. Also all my pigments that I use, the palette, the link to my palette, the link to the paper and the brushes that I use, etc. I have 2 cups of water. 2 cups of water is really important for today's lesson because we're going to be mixing so many different colors. If you're just working with 1 cup of water, you're going to get brown or muddy water really quickly. So I recommend, if you don't have 2 cups of water out with you yet, going and grabbing a 2nd cup of water so that you can separate your warm colors from your cool colors. Or if that's confusing for you and you don't know what a warm color is versus a cool color, which we're going to talk about those differences in this class actually. But then you can use 1 cup is for washing your brush off. So it's dirty water and then clean water. So keep this clean. This is for dirty or warm versus cool. All right. So all my colors in here are listed in the link below in the description. So if you want the specific color names and you want to order them yourself on Amazon or whatever, they're there for you along with the paper and the brushes. I'm only going to be working with 1 brush today, and it's my size 6 round from Princeton. It's their Heritage 4050 series. So this is my all-time favorite brush from Princeton, and it's my favorite size. The hair of the brush is synthetic sable hair, and so it's incredibly flexible and snappy. And so even when it's wet, it doesn't flop over like a sad wet mop like some synthetic squirrel hair brushes will do, and other more coarse hair brushes. It's really flexible, it's really snappy, and it holds a lot of the pressure. It's not inside of the video, it's in the description of the video. You can see all the supplies linked, Laura. And then we also have a list that maybe Kelly can grab and send you the link to. So this hair of this brush is really flexible and snappy. So I love these brushes. If you don't have them, I recommend checking them out. Again, everything's linked in the description of this video or in the supply list that we sent out, etc. So this is the only brush I'm going to be working with, but if you don't have a round brush on hand, that's totally fine. Anything will do for this class. We're just going to be going over color mixing. And then at the end of the class, we are going to paint a pattern that is like this, and then a full fruit piece like this. So we're going to do a couple different pieces at the end. And at the end, I'm going to show you where I decide to place certain colors and for what reason, etc. But let's talk color theory. So moving that to the side, moving our supplies to the side for a second, we're just going to do a little mini lesson of color theory. There is so much to cover in color theory. It is a very, very, very complex topic, and it's something that pulls in science, and it also pulls in psychology, and it is really fascinating. I became fascinated with color theory a few years ago, and it's something that I write about in both of my books, Everyday Watercolor and Everyday Watercolor Flowers, because I'm so fascinated by color theory. I was a psychology major in college, and so I love that it kind of pulls in some of that psychology that I learned in college and how people view certain colors and their kind of reactions and personalities of colors, etc. But along with that, color theory is actually a scientific theory. It was developed by Sir Isaac Newton. He developed the color wheel. And so it's really not just an artistic thing. There's a lot that we can learn from color that can inform how we make decisions or what really incites certain moods or feelings or emotions. And so we're going to talk about color and color relationships a little bit, but there is so much more to cover. So if you want to dive even deeper in the subject, make sure you check out my books, which are linked in the description below. But then also just there's so much information on Google if you really wanted to go down the rabbit trail and dig deep into color theory. So why am I so passionate about talking about color theory? So if you're a brand new artist, or you've never painted before, you've barely ever painted before, or let's say you're just starting to learn watercolor or whatever, or maybe you're even more advanced in your art journey, but you just don't know when to place certain colors, etc. Then understanding color and color relationships is going to help boost that confidence with your brush. A lot of people, when they sit down to paint, they look at a blank sheet of paper and they get really intimidated and unsure of what to do when and where to place specific colors or shapes, etc. But when you understand how colors work together, you become way more confident about where to place colors on the paper, and you'll enter into that flow state when you're, creative and you're able to turn off that logical, analytical side of your brain, and you're just in your complete flow state. That is when you're able to enter in a meditative state with painting or whatever the art form or medium that you're creating in. And so understanding color theory is going to allow you to access that part of your brain a lot easier and with more confidence, because you have that knowledge, you have that research under your belt, and you're really comfortable with just laying colors down because you know what's going to work and what isn't going to work. All right, so to start, you guys have seen a color wheel before, I'm sure. But to start, we have three primary colors always. They're always the same three primary colors. And our three primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. And they always sit like a triangle or triad away from each other on the color wheel. So they always make a triangle like this. Differing color wheels will have different primary colors at the top. That doesn't totally matter. Like, for example, right now, red is at the top for this one and blue and yellow are down here, but they always sit like a triad or triangle away from each other on the color wheel. And the reason for that is their relationship with each other. So these three primary colors cannot be made up of any other pigments. These are like the foundational pigments that make up all of these tertiary and secondary colors. And you can mix them together to make almost any color imaginable. It's really hard to hand mix neon colors. And so that's why I like to buy like phthalo turquoise and even cobalt blue, et cetera, because those are really difficult colors to mix by hand. But you can mix black with these three colors. You can mix that. Paint is really expensive, and I don't want to buy 12 tubes of paint. And you just want to get started. Starting with the three primary colors is a great place to start because you can mix up so many different colors with those. And then if you mix up brown, you can also, add a touch of brown to a red orange to make it a more clay color instead of a vibrant red orange. So there's a lot that you can do with just three colors. And then I want you to pay attention to the distance between colors on the actual color wheel. So the color wheel is a really great scientific visual for how colors are actually interacting with each other and their relationships with each other. So the closer together a color is, the more peaceful or smooth the transition on your eye is going to be. So these, for example, this is pure red or mid red right here. This is red purple or red violet. This is a very subtle transition. So for your eyes, it's really incredibly peaceful. Whenever you're moving in the direction to blue, it's going to be gradually more peaceful. This because blue incites a lot of peace, it incites a lot of calmness. That's why a lot of brands use the color blue. There's also the Calm app. They use the color blue for their color palette. It's just a really peaceful and calming color. And so the closer you get to blue with red, the more you're going to incite kind of this calmness and that peacefulness. Whereas red is more of an energetic color. It's a really exciting color. Sometimes it evokes some sort of anger or angsty type of emotion when it's used in certain circumstances. But the more blue that you add to it, the more it's going to be grounded and coming back to that kind of peaceful tone. And so it's going to offset that kind of angsty emotion. Not all times, not all contexts do these colors evoke those types of emotions, but overall kind of color theory psychology, those are some basic emotions. And then while yellow is more like energetic, it's playful, it's really joyful and happy. That's why you think of the sun when it's yellow, etc. Just something that's really joyful, playful, etc. You can mix red from magenta and yellow. Yes, you can. But those are formulated colors. Those aren't colors you find in nature. So the pure pigments of like red, blue, and yellow are all pigments that you find from minerals in nature. So then magenta is a formulated color. But that's getting deeper into actual color, which I'm not going to cover in this class. But so then in between blue and yellow, you have all of your secondary and tertiary colors like blue, green. Mid green is your secondary color. And then same thing with blue and red. Obviously, equal parts of those two primary colors is going to be violet. Equal parts of red and yellow is going to be orange. Equal parts of yellow and blue is going to be green. So those are your secondary colors. And then on either side of your secondary colors are going to be what's called tertiary colors. Tertiary colors are like the beautiful extension between your primary to your secondary. So when you are painting a piece, let's say, whoops, I forgot this is a little wet still, so don't want to grab too much. Let's say you're painting a floral piece, and I'm just gonna paint a little bud here. And it's using Scarlet Lake, so that's my red color. Let's say I am painting my stem with my mid green color, which in my palette is sap green. Contrasting. So for example, all contrasting colors on the color wheel will land directly across from each other. So violet and yellow or purple and yellow are contrasting colors. They sit complete opposite of each other on the color wheel. So remember, the distance or the space between colors on the color wheel is really important to pay attention to. It really notifies you of what their actual relationship to each other is. So these colors that sit complete opposite of each other on the color wheel are furthest apart on the color wheel. So that means that they're pulling on either side of the color spectrum. And so if you are looking at a piece that has a lot of contrasting colors going on, it's going to create a lot of strain. When used effectively, contrasting colors can bring a lot of vibrancy and a lot of life and vitality to a piece, but you have to make sure that you use it effectively. So if you're using just contrasting colors, it can kind of put a bad taste in somebody's mouth that's looking at the piece. And so to offset this red and green, because these are both mid-red, mid-green, we're going to just shift our color. So I have red is my flower color and then mid-green is my stem color. Now I'm just going to inch my way a little bit closer to red by coming closer to yellow with my green. So I'm just going to grab sap green in my palette with a little bit of yellow. Maybe go back over that stem. For my leaf. So this yellow-green is much brighter. It's much more vibrant because it has yellow in it, but it's also closer on the color wheel to red. So it's not as far away. It's not as opposing to red as mid-green is. Over one hue to yellow green. So this contrast here between red and green is a lot for your eyeballs to kind of do in activity wise. So they're jumping from red all the way over to green. So to kind of help make that transition a little bit smoother, adding in yellow green leaves is going to help smooth that transition out for your eyes. So this transition from mid-green to yellow-green is one step over, and that would be considered a part of an analogous color palette. So mid-green, yellow-green to yellow is an analogous color palette. So contrasting color palette would include contrasting colors, of course. Monochromatic would be something that has the same values, just tonal differences, and it's using the same colors. So like blue, light blue, midnight blue, navy blue, that's monochromatic. And then you have multiple different, and that is the most peaceful transition, the most peaceful and subtle transition for people's eyes. And so if you have a lot of contrasting colors on your piece, that's completely fine. You just want to make sure that you're not overdoing it or you're doing it on purpose and there's some sort of break for people's eyes to look at. So let's get closer to red with some yellow and start to merge into yellow with this flower. So we have red, mid-green, yellow-green. Now let's maybe add in some yellow berries with a touch of red. With some berries. So as you noticed, I'm not going right to pure yellow because again, that's going to be slowly transition into those yellows and oranges with these berries. And I'm lightening some of the values. There's some lighter berries, there's some darker berries. And then maybe this set of berries over here is true yellow or mid yellow. He's already awake. That's outrageous. Okay, so then from here, I can start to add in my oranges. So see how I'm following this whole side of the spectrum. I've got red and green, and now I've got yellow-green with my leaves. I'm starting to add in my yellows and oranges and more deeper oranges and red oranges to kind of bridge that gap between red and green. John's gone. So I'm just going to do a little section of florals. I'm not going to do a full floral piece, but I just want you to see how it works with a floral piece before we move on. And then we're going to get into color mixing and then all the other goodies. And then we can add in stems, like some. And brown is a warm color because it has a base of red to it. It has more red in it than blue. But every hue on the color wheel has nods to cool tones and warm tones. It really just depends on the actual color that you're buying from the tube or you're mixing up. But if you're wondering what a warm color versus a cool color is, well, let's just split our color wheel in basically red, violet to yellow and over is all warm colors. Whereas the other side with, blue, violet to yellow, green is going to be your cool colors. There's nuances to every single color. There's even warm blues. There's cool reds sometimes. It just depends on the actual undertones. But for the most part, on your color wheel, if you're looking at your color wheel and you're just looking for a quick reference of what a warm color versus a cool color is, red, violet to yellow is warm. Blue, violet, or violet to yellow, green is going to be cool for the most part. I don't keep a color wheel handy when I'm painting. I just know color and color mixing relatively well, so I don't keep it on hand, but it would be super helpful to paint something like this and have it on hand if you're unfamiliar with color theory basics. Okay, so then from here, if I were finishing out this piece, I would love to bring in the full spectrum of color on this color wheel. And so we've got our green tones, we've got yellow, green, we have red, orange, orange, yellow, orange, and yellow. I would love to come up here to my blues and do some blue green leaves and maybe do some blueberries so that we can fully close out that whole color wheel. I'm not going to do that right now, but basically what that would entail for your eyes is just a really smooth transition between red to orange, red, orange, orange, yellow, yellow, green, green, blue, green to blue. And then we can include some violets too if we wanted to. And it's just a great way to paint all of the colors in the color wheel, but also make it really peaceful and easy on your eyes to make that transition. Because if I just had red, green, and yellow for this piece, it would look really high in contrast. It wouldn't look as pleasing as something with yellow, orange, and red, orange, and yellow, green, and green. Because it's just a more subtle transition. It helps bring variety, helps bring movement to your piece. So whether you're painting flowers, landscapes, portraits, whatever you're painting, it's just all about thinking about adding in varieties of each hue. So tertiary, just lessening the contrast. This video will be available later. Yes, the replay link will be the same as this exact link that you're on. Okay, so back to color theory. So we know that we have three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and how they sit with each other on the color wheel. They're always making a triangle on the color wheel. And then equal parts of two primary colors is going to equal a secondary color. So our secondary colors are orange, green, and purple. And then our tertiary colors are all of our hyphenated color, or a hyphen in the name, etc., is going to be considered a tertiary color. And then within each color, we have our darkest value is on the color is going to be. And so you have multiple different values within one hue. So for example, this yellow orange right here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different swatches of values of that same yellow orange. You can obviously get a lot more values out of one color than that, but there's a lot of distance you can go with just one color by adding water to your mixture or rinsing off some color on your brush so that it lightens that color that you started with or that thicker mixture. So there's a lot more to color in terms of contrast than just with hues. So for example, contrasting colors on a color wheel sit directly opposite of each other. So red and green, purple and yellow, blue and orange, etc. But along with that, if you want to offset some of that contrast, so let's say we wanted to use red and green like we did here with this stem and this flower, well, we could make it a lot more subtle of a contrast, more complementary of a contrast, if one or other of the hues was lighter than the other. So full strength green, mid green, combined with a lighter, like mid value red is a lot more subtle on your eyes. There's not as much competition. So when you have equal strengths of two contrasting colors, there's going to be a lot of competition going on. We're offsetting that competition with this little bundle here because we have tertiary and secondary color wheel and direct opposites. So if I had a lighter green for the stem or a lighter red for the floral, it would offset that contrast a little bit and make it a little bit more easy on the eyes. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're painting your pieces. If you're thinking about, I'm about to add two contrasting colors right next to each other. Well, maybe you can offset the contrast a little bit by shifting on the color wheel by grabbing red violet or red orange to offset it, or over here with green. Or you can offset the contrast a little bit by just lightening one of your hues so that it's not as competitive between the colors. Does that make sense, you guys? Very brief overview of some color theory, but now let's get into some color mixing, and we'll continue to talk about color theory as well. So bust out whatever brush you have in your pigments. I have an empty, don't have a secondary mixing well, but when I'm doing a color theory lesson and mixing a lot of colors and trying to show them really pure, I would prefer mixing in here so it stays clean. But normally when I'm just painting patterns or florals or whatever, I don't use this to red to you. Depends on the brand that you're using or whatever you're using, but I'm going to grab red, a lot of water and a lot of red on my brush so I can have it in its full strength. And we're going to do something similar to these color Lake by itself. Scarlet Lake with yellow ochre. Oh, and this is Opera Rose too, I guess. Opera Rose and Burnt Umber, Scarlet Lake and Opera Rose, Scarlet Lake and Cadmium Orange, Scarlet Lake and Opera Rose and Ultramarine Violet, Scarlet Lake, Cadmium Orange and Ultramarine Violet again, or that was Opera Rose, never mind. Scarlet Lake and Ultramarine Violet, Scarlet Lake and Burnt Umber, etc. And so you get a variety of different types of reds by adding in another hue. So we're just going to grab some red. I don't use permanent rose because I don't like it. And that's just my own personal preference. Every artist is different. For us, it's totally fine. So keep lowering your video quality or scroll back in the video like 10 to 30 seconds so you're not watching it completely live, but you're a little bit behind and the video should catch up. There's a lot of people watching and there's a lot of people on YouTube right now, so it's going to affect the quality, unfortunately. So I can't really do anything on my end, unfortunately. All right, so red, if we mix it with equal parts with Opera Rose, we get a slightly different, more kind of corally poppy red. I know this is hard to see in this lighting and with this camera angle. That's what you get with live video on YouTube. But just by adding slightly different hues to our red, we are just shifting that hue a little bit and making it more vibrant or rich, etc. I'm 10 seconds behind and it still feels live because the conversation is still on the screen when you address it. That's fun. All right, so basic color mixing. So what I like to do if I'm mixing a color is add it into an empty well. So I'm going to add Scarlet Lake a big glob of it into an empty well and add water. As you can see, brand new palettes will do this kind of beading of the pigment. If you just continue to add water, it'll eventually wear it off. But you can also rub a glue stick with a paper towel over a new plastic palette, and it will kind of wear off that seal that's on your palette. But this doesn't bother me. So I'm just going to keep going. All right, so let's mix red and yellow together. So we have red in our palette over here. And now I'm going to clean my brush off and grab yellow and bring it down here. So we've got red and yellow in our mixing wells. And I'm going to lay down a red swatch by itself and a yellow swatch by itself. So we've got a nice, vibrant, rich yellow and a nice, vibrant, rich red. So now to get a yellow-orange out of this red, we're going to just grab a little bit of yellow and add it to that red bit that we have and lay down a swatch. And it should be just slightly, grab a little more yellow, add it to the mixture again. And we're just going to do a hue scale. So it's going to go from red to red, orange, and gradually to orange, yellow, orange, and then back to yellow again. Back here again. Just grabbing more and more yellow. We actually might need to grab more yellow from the palette because we're running low over here. To yellow orange. So see that subtle transition for your eyes is super nice. Grabbing more yellow. So value and hue, the difference between value and hue is value is the lightness and darkness of a color, and hue is the actual color. So this would be a hue scale because we are gradually changing colors. A value scale is the lightness and darkness of a color. So this would be considered a value scale. So a darker yellow to a lighter yellow or a darker red to a lighter red. That is a value scale. So if I'm saying a value of a color, I'm talking about the lightness or darkness of a color, whereas the hue is the actual color itself. So this would be considered a red-orange hue or a yellow-orange hue, yellow, etc. So if we're talking about a hue scale, we can gradually change hues by adding one primary color or secondary color or tertiary color gradually to another color and kind of shift it gradually like that. So if you're wanting to work with a really peaceful or an analogous color palette, then I would recommend, kind of coming over here into an empty color well if it's on your palette like this or a secondary palette, and gradually adding one color to another to subtly transition the color for people's eyes like we did up here. I personally am very type B, and so if I want to subtly transition a color, all I'm going to do is go right to my yellow and grab some yellow and then start painting. A lot of people really stress out with that because it does add red to your yellow dish. And a lot of people who are maybe more precise or type A, nothing wrong with that, but they start to clam up and get really nervous about that happening. And that's totally fine. If that bothers you, just get a little clean dish on the side or clean off one of your mixing wells in your palette, and you can just bring the red in there, then bring the yellow in there with it, with a, Laura says that's me, with a clean brush, and it will stay clean. However, if you want to be more type B like I am over here with my palette a little bit messy, we can lift off that orange in my yellow with a brush or a paper towel, and it comes right off. Also, whenever I'm adding a color to another color in a dish, I make sure to not go all over the top of that color with a different color. because then we can't grab that pure color underneath. So I'm only going to one side or one specific area on the color and leaving the pure color for the rest if I want to grab just the yellow by itself. What size is that paper block? It is 9 by 12. All right, so here's how you do a hue scale, a value scale. Let's talk about values right now. And I talked about it a little bit already, but with watercolor, to lighten your colors, so to lighten the contrast a little bit, or the saturation, you would let's grab Scarlet Lake, a really thick amount of it, or whatever red color you have, and lay down a swatch. And then to gradually lighten that color, I'm just going to come up to my water cup and swash back and forth. So just flick my brush back and forth a couple of times to release that pigment. And it should be gradually lighter, and continue to do that between each swatch. So I'm just swashing back and forth to release some pigment off my brush, to gradually lighten the hue of this color, Scarlet Lake. So 2 things here. If you're doing this with me, if you're practicing this value scale with me, there's 2 different types of personalities. There's the really dainty and afraid personality, and then there's the really aggressive personality. And it goes from really dark value to a super, super light value in the second swatch. You want this to be incredibly gradual. But then there's some people who are afraid to really flick their brush around, and it stays the same value for every single swatch. So you need to find the right balance. But I'm basically flicking my brush in my water just back and forth, and then swiping off the excess water and laying down a swatch. In between each swatch, I'm doing that same flicking motion and getting rid of the excess, and then laying down a new swatch until I go to as light as I possibly can, where it's just tinted. The more water you use, the more transparent it's going to be, so the lighter it looks. So you don't need to be buying like a lighter red or a dark versus a darker red and a darker red. You can have all of these values within one tube of paint, which is pretty awesome. What's your take on cyan, yellow, magenta color wheel versus the traditional blue, yellow, red color wheel as it pertains to watercolor mixing? I've always gone the traditional route just because I don't like the color magenta. And so I've always just used red, blue, and yellow. It's just personal preference. And it's based on traditional research. But seriously though, I ran out of watercolor paper and I only have my heavy-handed. That's a good way of putting it. I'm dainty and afraid. All right. So we have our hue scale and our value scale. If you didn't practice this, go back in the video after watching the live and practice this. I know that this seems super, super basic, but color mixing is where a lot of people really stress and aren't comfortable, is with color mixing. And if you understand how to gradually shift the hue from one color to another, you can do that with all of the colors in your palette. I also have a video on doing a color study on my YouTube channel that is super fun to do. Anybody can do it, where I go over something similar to this color chart. But basically all I did here is exactly what I cover in this color study chart. So for this block, for example, I mixed Prussian blue with Opera Rose, Prussian blue with Scarlet Lake, Prussian blue with Ultramarine Violet, Prussian blue with Phthalo Turquoise, etc. And so using 2 colors, doing a hue scale and a value scale for all of those hues. So a hue scale going up and then a value scale going across. So 3 different values and then 5 different hues with just 2 colors. Very fun video, very fun exercise, and really great practice. So I covered what is a warm color, or, oh, I see what you're saying, a warm red or a cool red, a warm blue, a cool blue. I'm not going to cover that in this video because it's really complex and it's different per color. So it'd be a really lengthy video. And we're just focusing on that make it more of a cool color or a warm color, even if you would think like, oh, it's red, it must be always a red or a warm color. It's not always the case. So I would recommend doing further research on your own time. All right, so let's tear up another sheet of paper, get our blank sheet of paper out. Tricks with color mixing that I find really fascinating. So let's take the color Opera Rose, and you can do this with any color in your palette. So let's take the color Opera Rose, which is pink. Pink by itself. And we can do this value scale by pulling that color with our water. And we have that hue and value scale. But let's say I want to make this more of an earth tone pink. So a little bit more, what's a good, not clay because it doesn't really have orange in it, but let's just say we want to make it a little bit more grounded with some earth tone to it. Then we can pull it into our empty mixing well. And it's hard to know and hard to navigate around color and mixing colors from your head if you've never done it before. So I recommend just exploring color and doing this along with me and just seeing what happens. You might be surprised by when you mix two colors together that you think would look awful together by what the result would be. So I just added brown to Opera Rose and it makes it this kind of earthy tone purple. Grab a little more brown to it actually. And the brown I'm using is burnt umber. So that is a beautiful earthy toned kind of pinky purple color, just with adding brown to that Opera Rose. Let's grab Opera Rose again and see what it looks like mixed with Prussian blue. Prussian blue and Opera Rose. This is I'm not a huge fan of purple, and so this is my go-to way of mixing purple is with Opera Rose and Prussian blue instead of Scarlet Lake or a red color in Prussian blue, because red and blue makes a really traditional purple, and this is more of like a vibrant, exciting purple to me. So I'm lightening it by just grabbing water and pulling that out. I discussed wet and wet technique in day 1 of JR Art School. And so if I'm going fastly through wet and wet technique and how to pull that and make this a value scale, I recommend watching that video because we covered that in that video, day 1. But basically I'm just adding water and I'm pulling that pigment that I started with out to make it lighter. All right, so Opera Rose, let's add some yellow to Opera Rose. We have yellow over here. Yellow and lemon yellow deep and Opera Rose is probably my favorite color mixture that you can do with the colors that I use. It makes this really rich, vibrant kind of corally pink when it has more Opera Rose in the mixture than yellow. Make it a bit more orange. So this is just Opera Rose and more lemon yellow deep than this swatch above here. Pulling it out with water. So isn't this fun? It's just colors and lightened colors with water on your paper, and it looks so pleasing to your eyeballs. Like I would put this up on my shelf to look at all day, any day. It's just really pretty to look at. Let's go back to this purple color and start mixing in a third color. So for this purple, we did Opera Rose and Prussian blue, grabbing a touch of brown. And now it's really smoky. We can make it slightly more purple if we want to by grabbing just a touch more of Opera Rose, mixing it in, and a touch more of Prussian blue, mixing it in, and balancing it out with one stroke of burnt umber, the brown. So now it's like a grayish tone purple with a slight undertone of brown. This is why I recommend doing these color studies and just playing with your color. So this was Opera Rose and Lemon Yellow Deep. What if we added some brown to that and got a more muted blush tone? This is a very feminine color. And then same thing with this mixture over here, where there was more Lemon Yellow Deep with Opera Rose. Let's add a touch of brown to it, see what it does to our color. Kind of a terracotta color. And I've only been using 3 colors, obviously varying the second color that I use with Opera Rose. But the third color has always been brown, and the first color has always been Opera Rose. And then we did, this is Opera Rose by itself. This was, what was this one? Oh, this was Opera Rose in Burnt Umber, Opera Rose with Prussian Blue, Opera Rose with a little bit of yellow, Opera Rose with a lot of yellow, and then Opera Rose, Prussian Blue, and Burnt Umber, Opera Rose, Lemon Yellow Deep, and Burnt Umber, Opera Rose, a lot more Lemon Yellow Deep, and then a little Burnt Umber. So that slight shift in these hues right here makes it more muted, makes it more earth tones with that brown, whereas this is more vibrant, more juicy. So if you're thinking like painting really loose and whimsical style, maybe more vibrant, bold colors, not adding too much brown or muting your colors down, versus if you were painting something more grounded. Come up with using Opera Rose still. So I'm going to come over here using Opera Rose still, but instead of mixing it with Prussian Blue, I am going to grab Cobalt Blue. So this is a more royal blue color. Royal blue has like kind of a little bit of white in it. It makes it just a little bit more, not muted, but it's just kind of diffused a little bit. And it's obviously super vibrant. Let's see what kind of purple we get in comparison to Prussian Blue mixed with Opera Rose. And it's kind of like the Lakers color purple. It's a bit more vibrant or cool. And then how about Opera Rose with, or your pink color you have in your palette, whatever color that is, with Phthalo Turquoise, so a turquoise color. You guys doing this with me? Having fun color mixing? So Phthalo Turquoise kind of makes the purple a bit hazy, which I love. It's a bit hazy. Hello from Utah. So our hazy tones, that kind of has a gray undertone. This hazy purple would be beautiful with this kind of hazy, earthy tone, taupe purple up here that has more pink in it. I'm trying my first time. So we can combine these earth tones together for a really lovely palette. Let's put that terracotta next to that blue, so, or that purple. So if you remember back to the color wheel, blue and orange are contrasting colors. This is a terracotta, kind of emulates orange. And this is a hazy purple, but it has a lot of blue in it. And so these contrasting colors are nodding to each other. They're providing a lot of vibrancy with each other, and they're working really well together because they're both kind of on the same level of grounded and earthy and hazy. And they're beautiful together. Whereas if I were to combine ultramarine violet in my palette, which is violet, obviously, next to cadmium orange, I love the hazy purple too. Yes, even if you're using whatever colors you have on hand, it will work. So obviously this is a very different look. This ultramarine violet next to cadmium orange, next to this hazy purple using phthalo turquoise and opera rose, mixed with this opera rose, lemon yellow deep, and burnt umber. So this would be a nice color palette for something really springy. If you're painting florals, like doing a really beautiful spring bouquet with this terracotta and hazy purple. This could also make for a really beautiful morning landscape for like a seascape, because this hazy purple would be really beautiful for like a sky color, and maybe making it even more hazy with a touch more brown or something. And then this could be a beautiful sand color or some light poking in the sky. So it's all about the overall mood and emotion that you're wanting to convey in your piece. This one's obviously just like vibrant, bold, in your face, and more subtle down here with the browner earthy tones. And the different ratios that you have with your combinations. So for example, having more pink than yellow in this one gave us a completely different color than that same combination, but with more yellow in the mixture. Yes, there's a lot of different kinds of gray. There's warm grays and cool grays. There's purple grays, blue grays, yellow grays. There's all different kinds of grays. But the most easy way of coming up with a gray is a lighter value of black. So yes, or more transparent color of black. Let's see. I actually think I have a color wheel that is dedicated to blacks and grays. Let's see. Yep. So, for example, this gray was mixed up with Scarlet Lake, ultramarine violet, phthalo turquoise, and sap green. None of those colors say black, and none of them say gray. They're red, purple, blue, and green. But mixed together, they make this beautiful kind of really subtle purple gray. This is red, blue, and yellow mixed together to make a gray. Scarlet Lake, phthalo turquoise, lemon yellow deep. This is Mars black mixed with yellow ochre. So it's got kind of like a tan undertone for that black or that deeper gray. This is Scarlet Lake, which is red, ultramarine violet, lemon yellow deep, and Mars black. So you can get a lot of different types of grays, and this is just a few of them. By mixing contrasting colors, you can get brown, and then you can add another primary color to it to get a black and then lighten it. There's a lot of different variations of black and grays. Probably have to watch this video several times. I know we're covering a lot of information here. So I want to move us on to doing our pattern and then doing our fruit piece for this next hour. So we covered some basic color theory. We also covered some basic how to mix your colors. And so I'm doing this kind of exercise constantly when I'm painting patterns like this, or when I'm painting fruit pieces like this, or even my florals, etc. I'm constantly just shifting colors by mixing in my mixing well or grabbing and rolling on colors, etc., because I want a subtle transition for people's eyes throughout my piece. So obviously in this fruit piece, for example, we have a lot of red and green. We have strawberries and we have leaves and stems, etc. And if that was all that was going on in this piece, the emotion that I would be conveying with this piece overall would be completely different than what I'm conveying right now with the blues, the blue greens, the yellow greens, yellows, yellow orange, and red orange. So I'm bridging the gap of that full spectrum. We're not reaching over here into purples, but we're bridging the gap from blue all the way to red with this one piece. And because of that, we are creating a really large analogous color palette. So analogous color palette, again, is when you are using a color palette that has at least 3 or 4 colors that sit directly next to each other on the color wheel. So these are neighbors. These are best friends. These are, brothers and sisters. These are people that are people. The colors are people. These are colors that are really close to each other, and they work so well together. They work so well in bridging the gap between yellow and blue, for example, are really far apart from each other on the color wheel. So that's why we have blue-green for our stems, and we have some bleeding with the pink, etc. So that's bridging the gap there. And so you want to think about bridging the gap for people's eyes as much as possible, because that's going to help ease the transition between colors. It sounds so basic, but doing, a leaf in yellow green and not from color to color. So instead of just going to sap green every time for all of my leaves and all of my stems, I'm grabbing sap green for some of them, but then I'm also grabbing lemon yellow deep to make a yellow green, like for these leaves down here. And then maybe I'm lightening that lemon yellow deep for a lighter yellow green, so it's not all the same value as well, which is the lightness and darkness of a color. So always thinking about adding variation and variety. That's going to create movement and peaceful, seamless transitions between color. So to get started with that, we're going to do this kind of rainbow-y piece. Again, I'm only using my size 6 round brush. So use whatever brush you have on hand, but this is the brush that I'll be using. And for these like half moon shapes, I am just using one stroke. I'm not coloring it in or anything. I'm basically just going to be, let's do it on this sheet. I'm basically just going to be using my brush on its side, loud vehicle outside, using my brush on its side like this. So I've got my brush pointed about 35 degrees away from the paper, so it's a slanted hold. I don't have it pointed straight up and down like this. I have it more on its side. And so I'm going to put my brush on the paper and then apply pressure and drag and then release pressure. If you guys were here for day 1 of my JR Art School, we painted leaves. It's basically just like a leaf, a one-sided leaf. So you're laying your brush down, applying pressure, and then releasing pressure. Lay your brush down, apply pressure, release pressure. If that's difficult for you, you can also just paint a half moon and color it in. But it's mound or half moon shape. So that's all we're going to be doing. And I want, instead of doing rainbow colors, I want us to do whatever turquoise color you have, or close to turquoise, maybe just blue, if you just have Prussian blue or cobalt blue, whatever color you have that's similar to turquoise or close to it, so a blue. A brighter blue would be preferred, but whatever blue you have, with opera rose. So if you have a different pink color or even a red color will work. And we're going to just use those 2 colors to transition. So it's going to be, so I'm going to actually clean off, soak up this paint here so I can mix my colors in here. So if you need to do that, grab a wet paper towel and just kind of soak that up. Of course, getting messy. Painting is messy. There we go. Now it's all fresh. All right. Okay. So I'm just going to start with opera rose by itself. I'm just going to load up with it and then go straight to my paper and start going with my half moons. They don't need to be perfectly shaped. They can all be different in size, shape, etc. They don't need to be perfect. Some I'm going to lighten and some are going to be full, the darkest full value of opera rose. But if I lighten my half moon, I'm just flicking my brush in my water cup, swiping off that excess water, then going right up to the edge of that moon that's right before it and applying pressure and releasing. And if you vary it like this with values, you're going to see really cool bleeds in your piece. So I recommend that you have lighter ones next to darker ones, etc. If you guys have questions on this, just let me know in the chat so I can make sure to answer your questions. So I'm just going across, only using opera rose right now. I'm not mixing it with phthalo turquoise just yet. I'm going to make this one whiter. And I've got opera rose, a full strength opera rose for some of these half moons. And then I've got I rinsed it off in my water, and I did half moons with mostly water. Opera rose, let's see, move it into the camera. Opera rose, grab a lot of it and bring it into this mixing well. And then I'm just going to grab and roll my clean brush on top of phthalo turquoise maybe once or twice, and that's it. And then add it. That was actually kind of a lot, so I'm going to add a little bit more opera rose to it. All right, so my next, maybe a little more. Somehow that grabbed a lot of phthalo turquoise. So we're just gradually transitioning with a touch of phthalo turquoise or whatever blue you have. Yes, this number 6 brush is fabulous. So doing the exact same thing. They don't need to line up perfectly. Doing some lighter hue or values and some darker values. So the darker values are the ones that have more pigment on the brush than water. The lighter ones have more water. Particular go-to color for sunsets. It really depends on, again, on the scene, on the emotion that I'm trying to make the viewer feel. So like if I'm wanting it to feel peaceful, or if I'm wanting it to feel just like over the top magical, there's a lot of different varieties of sunsets. There's hazy sunsets, there's cloudy sunsets, there's really just juicy, pungent sunsets. But I love using opera rose, cobalt blue, Prussian blue, and some cadmium orange for sunsets. Those are like probably my 4 go-tos. All right, so we have, let's add a little more opera rose. It's kind of shrinking. Opera rose with a touch of phthalo turquoise, or whatever you got in your palette. Let's go a little bit more turquoise, and then I might add some brown to it to make it more earthy tonies. Aren't some pigments just stronger as in more pigmented? Yes, absolutely. So with a bit more phthalo turquoise in this next mixture. I love this purple. This is back to that hazy purple. This is kind of like an abstract sunset that we're painting right now, a little bit. Especially this piece. In fact, I think I called this pattern sunset, ocean sunset or something, because we have the ocean colors to the sun colors to the sky colors. Don't need to be in a straight line. That's what makes it a really cute, unique, and quirky pattern. And let's make this a bit more hazy, shall we? Let's grab a little brown. Still needs more phthalo turquoise though. And opera rose. So we're just gradually shifting our colors by adding either more blue to it or more pink to it. And then with this one, we're adding some brown. So we're washing it off in our cool cup of water. This is also great practice for your leaf strokes. If you were struggling with painting leaves from day one, this is a great way to practice. I'm going to use that same hue that I used up here, but I'm going to make it a little bit more pink this time. Just what I'm feeling right now. Let's add a little more brown. All right, so for this piece so far, we have a lot of pink that's standing out to me with one major, like really blue undertone purple. So I want to bring back some more blues now to help ground the piece and keep eyes moving down the piece. So let's grab some more phthalo turquoise, some aqua rose, but make it a little earthy with a touch of brown and a little more phthalo turquoise. There's no real method to this madness. I'm just trying to find a color that I really like. Ooh, that's fun. So this has pink in it, but it looks like a eucalyptus silver dollar color. It's phthalo turquoise, burnt umber, and aqua rose. So you start to discover some really fun ways of coming up with colors that you've always wanted to, using hues that you never thought would make that specific color. So even doing these fun patterns is practicing color theory and relationships and color mixing. Let's add some more phthalo turquoise. Touch of aqua rose. Ooh, I love that. It's kind of like a cobalt phthalo turquoise combo. Hazy purples. Soothing stuff. Maybe some more aqua rose here. You guys painting with me? So glad to hear that. Art really takes your mind off all the things that are going on in life, especially currently. Go at your own pace, scroll back a little bit. What's the trick for recalling the proportions of colors when you want to replicate it later? There is no trick, really. It's all about going with the flow and accepting the happy little accidents, as Bob Ross would say. And so you can get as close as you want to by just continuing with trial and error, but remembering the main colors that you used. And like, I'll notice the amount of times I'm swirling in a color. The amount of times that I'm swirling in a color. So for example, I just barely swiped on top of my brown like 2 or 3 times. And so for that color, that's not really a mathematical equation, but I can kind of gradually get myself back to that by remembering the amount of strokes or the amount of times that I dipped my color back in a dish. But if you do the color study chart, that is the separate video that I mentioned that we have linked in the description of this video. That is going to really help you with actually coming up with formulas and writing those formulas down. But since this is a loose color mixing study, we're not really paying attention and writing. Welcome. So this is another fun kind of muted hazy purple, but it has more pink in it. Oops. Watching while you fold laundry, that is a good idea. Boom. Look at all these fun purples. On the side in a different mixing well or whatever. Or just add a lot of pink to it. Pink is the vibrant color in this scenario, phthalo turquoise is also vibrant, but it has a bit of a muting tendency to it. So I just add a lot of opera rose. It's fun to just play with watercolor, even if you're used to, maybe you're more advanced in your watercolor. Getting back to basics and just enjoying color mixing and kind of surprising yourself with the colors you can come up with. I'm going to show you now that we're halfway down our paper. I'm going to show you now what these colors, phthalo turquoise and opera rose, look like with some cadmium orange in it. So I'm going to grab just a little bit of cadmium orange first. This is like equal parts phthalo turquoise and opera rose. So equal parts pink and turquoise. And I just have a touch of cadmium orange here. And it's made kind of this like mauve-y, hazy purple again. But it's a little bit more muted than this one. So that was opera rose, phthalo turquoise in equal parts, and then a touch of cadmium orange. I'm not worrying too much about these puddles of water and pigment because it's an abstract piece, and sometimes that texture in abstract pieces with the hard lines is fun to look at. But you can go back and soak up your puddles with a dry brush. I have tried other brands of pigment. I just always come back. I've tried, let's see, Daniel Smith. I've tried Holbein. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. And they're great. There's some great pigments in them, but I always come back to Winsor Newton. So other artists will prefer other colors. It really just depends. So this was phthalo turquoise, a touch of opera rose, and a touch of cadmium orange. Pigment mixing is an endless source of fun. Yes, it is. I'm going to grab a little bit more phthalo turquoise. And we've got this like muted blue-green color, sagey green. So we've only been using so far 4 colors for this entire piece, mainly just opera rose and phthalo turquoise. Opera rose and phthalo turquoise every single time. But then up here, we mixed it with some burnt umber for some of them. And then down here, we're mixing it with cadmium orange. And with phthalo turquoise, a little bit of pink and a little bit of orange, got green. So that's fun. If we wanted to get super nerdy and dig further into color theory, what resources do you recommend? Well, my book, Everyday Watercolor, covers it. Canva has some great color theory resources. I know it's super random, but Canva is like a design for non-designer site. Whoops, wrong color. And they have a lot of great information on color theory, actually. So I would recommend going on their website and looking up their color theory information. When I paint, I keep a paper strip nearby to test colors. Do you ever do that? I don't, because while it's still wet, if I don't like it, I can just overlap it. But that is a great idea to test the colors beforehand. It's totally up to personal preference. Not getting the green. Here, let me try and mix it up again in my palette. So phthalo turquoise with a touch of opera rose. That wasn't enough. And cadmium orange, just a touch. And we've got it. It needs a little bit more phthalo turquoise. We got it. Yes, lefties go right to left. Let's add a little bit more pink to that green and see what happens. Ooh, nice like purple brown color. So right now they shouldn't be too cloudy. They should be hazy. If they're cloudy or murky looking, it's probably a water problem. and you need to refresh your water cups because you either mixed from earlier some contrasting colors in there. Right now, we are using blue and orange together, phthalo turquoise and orange. And so contrasting colors most always create brown or a version of brown. And so you will get brown, but it shouldn't be murky or muddy because you can still have a vibrant or a pure brown without it being murky. Here, let's add pink. We have a touch of phthalo turquoise in there. Let's add a touch more. If you're going left to right and it's working fine for you, that's totally fine. It's totally up to personal preference. But right to left would be easier, I'm assuming, just because you're pulling the stroke instead of pushing it. But totally up to you. So that was a lot of cadmium orange. Adding more phthalo turquoise. We're back to that green. So I want to go to a little bit more pink, just so it's a little different from the screen. It's like a gray purple now instead of a brown purple like this row. Cool and warm colors. Which strokes you've made today are cool versus warm? So by just looking with the naked eye, anything that has a red undertone is going to be warm. Anything that has a blue undertone, for the most part, there's nuances here and there, is going to be a cool color. So obviously this is warm. This is a more pink purple. So this would be considered a warm color versus this one, which would be a cool color. So anything with more blue undertones, green is mixed with blue and yellow. So it's a cool color in this instance. So anything with blue undertones will be cool. Red undertones will be warm. More phthalo turquoise. We've got gray. We've got gray now, people. All from opera rose and phthalo turquoise, and right now cadmium orange. Color mixing is fascinating stuff. I'm going to paint one more row after this, and then we're going to move on to the fruits. Get a little vibrant up in here. Whoops. I lost my color. Get back to it. More orange. I had it and then it was gone. There we go. There's that mutiness. It's in my dish right here. There we go. Patience. Little warm still. Little blue. So sometimes you just got to be patient if the color is, you're trying to get back to a specific color. It's better. All right, one more row. Let's do this green, which again was with phthalo turquoise, opera rose, and cadmium orange. I don't know if you guys can hear my child upstairs squealing, but he's having a good time with Daddy. All right. So look at all those fun little half moon shapes. I would keep going and fill in this white space, but I want us to move on to our fruits. And I took a 4x6 piece of paper to put one swoosh of each pure color. That way I remember what the 4 colors were that I created all of these mixed colors. That's amazing. Great idea. Yeah, you can always watch the replay, Helen. All right. So fruits. I am not going to be doing very much complicated color mixing like I did for the earlier exercise where we're kind of going down a lot of different trails with 2 colors. I'm mostly going to be sticking to pink and red mixed with yellow for oranges, red oranges and yellow oranges, and then green mixed with yellow and blue for blue greens and yellow greens, and then some Prussian blue by itself. So when we're thinking about painting fruits, our apples, so our side apples, the like slices of apples, are basically exactly what we just did here with our half moons, but they're 2 different strokes. So I'm going to start on the top left-hand corner is where I like to start most of my big pieces like this. If you're left-handed, you might want to start in the top right-hand corner. It totally just depends on what's comfortable for you. But I'm going to grab Opera Rose and a touch of Scarlet Lake. This is my main warm color. You can also use a different hue variety by just using Scarlet Lake by itself sometimes for some of your apples, and then Opera Rose by itself for some of your other apples. Like this one is just Opera Rose, whereas this one is just Scarlet Lake. And then down here, I'm mixing the 2 together for a more like corally, vibrant reddish pink. But basically, if you were wanting to paint an apple slice on its side like that, we're just going to be painting a C curve, just like we did these half moons over here. So I've got my brush tilted on its side, and I'm going to drag it out with little to no pressure, then apply pressure for a C curve, and then taper that off with little to no pressure. Yes, Scarlet Lake is a red, and then Opera Rose is a pink. So that is the skin of the apple, or the outside of the apple. And then I'm going to wash it off. So I just have a very slight amount of that hue on my brush left, so it's a really light value. And then I'm going to grab the ends of that C curve and pull in. Basically just color that in, but leave a little thin gap of white space. I want this to be really light, so I'm just going to brush it across. I might even go back over with a clean dry brush. To soak up some of that pigment and make it lighter. Then I have, so this was red and pink mixed together. Now I'm going to slightly shift that hue a little bit for this next apple, and I'm going to make it just Opera Rose, so just pink. So I'm shifting hues between red and pink, but I'm also shifting hues between primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. So like pink, pink orange, orange, yellow orange, etc., or red orange if you're using red. And then I'm going to also shift people's eyes and make this apple point in a different direction. So we've got our C curve that gets fat in the middle. So I've got little to no pressure, and then releasing of that pressure. Rinse all of that off your brush. And then grab the ends with a straight line and fill that in for another apple. Let's maybe shift that hue on the color wheel a little bit. So I'm going to grab my mixing well, come up here, and I'm just going to add a touch of lemon yellow deep to that pink. Just a touch. So we've got another apple maybe coming over here, thin, thick, to thin again. And then release that color. And fill it in. And I want another one over here. Like so. Then at this point, I'm going to start adding in some other fruit varieties, some other colors. So let's grab some Prussian blue or whatever kind of darker blue you have in your palette. You can also mix up a dark blue by adding black to a blue color that you have if it's not dark enough for you. But I'm actually going to grab pigment and then wash off the majority of it in my water cup, swipe off the excess, and then using my brush on its side, so a slanted hold, I am going to basically outline a circle and then color it in for my blueberries. And then I'm going to darken my next blueberry and hit right next to it using wet and wet with these berries is really, really fun to look at. And so some of these berries are darker than others, but they're all super wet. So I'm able to blend and create those blooms with the watercolor. The bursting of color. Some berries are smaller than others because that's just what it is in nature. But remember, back to our color wheel, we have red, which is also pink is a variety of red. We have some red, yellow, or yellow orange, and blue. So we're kind of bouncing around this color wheel here. But we want to start picking up these red oranges. We want to start picking up these yellows and blue greens and greens to start bridging the gap between the red and the blue and the like yellow orange we have. So I gradually add in these little bits of berries to kind of, these are like the filigree moments in this fruit piece. These berries are. And I'm just kind of placing them. Like if you were to cut up a bunch of apples and then have berries, grab a scoop of all of those, fruits and throw them up in the air and see how they land. We're kind of going for that type of composition with this piece. And maybe we have some berries up here. This little section on the apple up here is still wet. And so I am going to add a little berry up there and touch right there, because I love in loose watercolor when these fun moments happen. So something to keep in mind as you're painting this type of piece is contrasting colors. So this is a yellow-orange apple right here, and then we have blue right next to it. Orange and blue are contrasting colors. And so that moment right here between the yellow, orange, and this blue is really effective in making this blue appear a little bit more vibrant. And it's also helping people pull their eyes to this. We don't want that to be the only moment of contrast. So we're going to create a zigzag with our contrasting color moments across the piece because people's eyes naturally want to land in a zigzag across your paper. And so you want to make sure that you're not just landing contrasting colors like these oranges and blues next to each other in one spot, because that's going to really stand out in the full piece once it's all done. So we're going to keep it in mind for later reference. Okay, so now that I have some blues down, I'm going to add in some green with a blue-green so that we can slightly shift from blue to green first with blue-green. So I'm going to grab some sap green and mix it up with a touch of Prussian blue. You shouldn't be the only one having to change your water, Laura. A lot of people are probably painting like this for the first time, so it's easy and natural to not know where to rinse your color off. I obviously need some more Prussian blue in this dish. So don't worry about that if that's happening. It's totally a normal thing. So I just mixed sap green with a touch of Prussian blue in my empty well right here, and I'm just going to add in some little sprigs with leaves on them. For this leaf stroke, I'm just using a slanted hold, applying pressure, releasing pressure. So that's a nice dark blue-green, and it helps that subtle transition between blue to blue-green because they're right next to each other on the color wheel. I don't want all of my leaves to be blue-green though. So I'm just gonna place a few, but I'm not going to have them all be blue-green. So we need to leave some space for other greens like sap green. So now we're moving to a mid-green with sap green. Okay, and now we need some yellow green. So I've got sap green on my brush. Come back over here and add yellow to it, lemon yellow deep. Yes, it is amazing how the colors change just by adding water to the brush. Lightens the hue. We want to do that for all of the elements that we're painting. So I just added lemon yellow deep to sap green for this. So we were going blue to blue-green to green to yellow-green. And then next we need some yellow in here. So maybe we'll paint some lemons. Lemons and apples. There you go for that. My colors turn out less vibrant. Can you show us the sweet spot between dry, saturated brush and the right amount? It also depends on the brand of colors that you're using, the type of colors that you're using. So it could be that I'm not sure what you're using. Let me know in the comments if you are using the same colors that I'm using and they're professional level. Yes, Fatima, you should always invest in good paints because that helps with the purity and the vibrancy of a color. But if you're using the same exact colors as me, then you probably just need to load up with a lot more pigment on your brush. So a lot of people kind of shy away from that. So we've got a troll in the comments. That's fun. Some people just don't grab enough pigment on their brush. So it's all about just grabbing a lot more pigment on your brush. All right, so let's see. We've got some apples. Now we need some yellow. I'm gonna grab lemon yellow deep. And we're gonna paint a lemon the exact same way we just painted our apples, but we're creating kind of a dance with our fruits. So they're not all gonna be pointing in the same direction and they're not all going to be clumped next to each other. So we're not just going to have apples on the top left and then lemons down here and then a different fruit. We're going to just kind of have this really loose look to it. I have several different brands of papers and that makes a difference in vibrancy too. Yes, paper is also really important with vibrancy. So for a lemon that isn't cut up, so a whole lemon, I'm going to use my brush on its side. So we've got like a 25, 35 degree angle away from the paper. So it's slanted. And I'm just going to give this little blob on my paper. And then I'm going to release some of that pigment and just grab a little bit more water and pull out a sphere shape, leaving some white space in the middle, maybe for like a little highlight or sunspot. And then a little bit more water to another point. So nothing crazy there. Maybe grab a little more yellow. Bring that down here. And then let's make our yellow green come back. For a little stem. And let's bring some yellow up here. So we're thinking about zigzags for people's eyes. So where can we zig from this yellow? The paper I'm using is Stonehenge Aqua cold press paper from Legion. Arches is great. I don't use it because it's so expensive. Legion is much more affordable of a really high quality paper, but it is really like amazing and important thing to do to invest in good high quality supplies, because it will make you want to practice more. If you're frustrated with your results and it could be fixed with better supplies, then imagine how more practiced and how more advanced you could be if you're loving the way your results. Sorry, I'm really struggling with painting and talking at the same time right now. So this lemon is going to be slightly more orange. Maybe it is an orange. But they're smaller in size to the apples. That might not be just because I don't think that's the case in normal real life. My mom's lemon tree has huge lemons, but just to vary the size too helps to create kind of like a bounce in your piece and some interesting contrasting moments with size. Okay, so now we're merging from red tones to orange tones to yellow tones, and we've got our yellow greens, we've got our mid greens, and we've got our blue greens. So this section is starting to really form well with color, and it's starting to really harmonize with those colors. And so I'm going to bring some more blue up here so we can lead people's eyes in a zigzag, because these little filigree berry moments, clementine, yes, clementine, that's what it is. Those are short and cute, cuties. So these filigree moments with the berries are really easy to like kind of trail off. You can do one berry leads to multiple berries, and it kind of creates this tapered look. And that's a really great way to fill in corners or weird gaps of white space. So berry, it can be a persimmon. Man, just not thinking of my cool fruits this morning. I guess it's not morning anymore either. All right. And back to our greens. You guys having fun with this piece? It's all about having fun. Even if you're like, mine looks nothing like teachers, you have to be gracious with your practice, because if you scroll really far back on my Instagram, you'll see some really beginner looking watercolor, which would probably be encouraging to you. So I do encourage you to do that. We all got to start somewhere. And it's all about developing that muscle memory. The palette is all sold out. I would just Google or hop in and search for another type of travel palette in Amazon. I've only used this brand, so I don't really know. And that's only because I've never really looked into other brands. I'm sure there's other great brands. I've just never used them. All right, let's bring that orange color up here to kind of elevate this yellow orange a little bit more and brighten it. Orange. And then zig, zag. Zigzag. Getting back to our apples. Thin, thick, thin again. So not getting too precise with my lines or my shapes, just going off of color and motion. Maybe red and pink together. I want that to bleed. There you go. I am using Sennelier, Rembrandt, and the same Opera Rose you do. Thanks for the explanation. You're very welcome. Opera Rose with Lemon Yellow Deep. Let's get those berries. So as you can see, I'm doing like clumps of apples first, then clumps of the berries, and then the little bits of fruits like clementines and lemons. Yes, I can show you how the eye zigzags. But we're already starting to zigzag with most of our elements. You don't need to think about it for every single thing. But right now we have the pink going boom, boom. We have lemons or yellow going in, starting to zigzag. So I'm going to bring another yellow down here and another pink down here, etc. You don't want to overthink that though and become too precise and analytical about zigging and zagging all over the place. But it's just how naturally people like to kind of glide across anything they're looking at, websites, paintings, all the things. Whoops. So let's grab this. More pink. Then back to blue. Who's enjoying painting the fruits and getting hungry? The berries are fun. For sure. Now let's go back to our lemons. Lemon, lemon. Let's put this guy, I don't want to go right below that lemon right there. Whoops. That works, whatever. I'll make that into a leaf right below there because then that'll lead people in a straight line down. So let's just maybe have it off to the side here. And then back down here. I'm gonna grab some orange, orange, orange. Don't forget about your hue or your value scales too. We can have light pinks. Boom. It is a process, but we're just enjoying seeing how we can use color to create a really peaceful transition. And grab some blue-green. How you guys doing? Getting there. Talking about shopping in the comments. Pink, red. Ooh, should I put some strawberries in here? Forgot about that. Well, tell your 9-year-old son that it takes a lot of practice. All right, let's paint some strawberries. I'm going to start with a lighter base of pink and red. And this is a good way to take up some more space too. It's exactly like the lemon that I did over here, except instead of having that little bump at the top, we're just going to kind of make it look like a heart. Not a super accentuated heart at the top because that would look kind of strange, but little heart shape. Maybe we have another strawberry over here that bumps into this strawberry and creates that fun bleed. Nice little heart-shaped strawberries, and then grab some yellow green for some leaves. We need some more yellow. So it's all about taking a pause after doing a little cluster of fruit or whatever you're painting and looking at where the color is landing on your piece. The yellow starts kind of low for me, so I want to bring in a little yellow bit up here. Maybe a lemon overlapping that apple right there. There's a replay, don't you worry. Lemon there. And more berry bits. Don't fret, Barbara. It should be hard. There's a lot going on. Just think about color and don't think about composition, and the composition will come. I know that's annoying, but you can think about it in terms of little wreath parts. So this would be considered part of a wreath. This could be a part of a wreath. This could be a part of a wreath. We've got little C curves going on with all of our sections of fruit. So I started up here with this section and I've made a C curve. Then I moved on to this section and I'm making it into a C curve down here with these berries. And it's basically the same type of composition or similar type of composition, just in different colors and different like positions and shapes for the fruits. So if you're struggling with composition, just think about it in terms of smaller paintings at a time. And get that composition down. So once you curve here, people will want to curve here, then they'll want to curve here, and then come down, and then back over. That is the ziggy zag. Oops, I forgot. Hello, everyone. So I've got this C curve here. This C curve is starting to form. I'm going to taper it off a little bit more and then add some bits in here too and up here. Got a C curve in here. I'm going to add this C curve now. Yes, looking at photos of still life definitely helps. And practicing color mixing and understanding color theory is also going to be really helpful in terms of knowing what colors are easy on the eyes. Yes, heritage brushes, you have way more control than Neptune brushes. Hope your migraine gets better. That sucks. I hate migraines. So if you're not seeing it composition-wise, you just have to relax and focus on shape and color first. And if it doesn't look good, you can always start over. You can always do the piece again. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at this composition thing. So don't get too discouraged. This is, you know, there's a lot going on in a piece that's similar to this or a piece like this. I'm not layering much at all. Like right now I just layered, so that would be considered wet on dry. But like all of this bleeding action, like this was a really light pink, but then the blue bled into it, that'd be considered wet and wet. So I'm only really working with one layer right now. So it's mostly wet and wet, but like every once in a while I'll overlap berries on top of other fruits that's dried. But I'm working pretty quickly, so most everything hasn't dried yet. Thanks for joining. More yellow green. Thanks for joining, Cindy. Now we're going extra long today. Covered a lot. More blue down here. Now I'm starting to paint faster because we've been painting a long time. Which you guys can keep painting. Go back to my channel. We have tons of videos for tutorials. We also have at 3 o'clock today, so in an hour, we have a galaxy painting tutorial being published, and it is real fun, real basic. So anybody of any age can do this. Super fun. And a nice way to decompress after doing something so dense and really beautiful. I'm sure you're doing beautiful despite how discouraged you might feel. But a galaxy, there's a lot more wide strokes. There's not much to think about when it comes to composition and laying things down like this. So highly recommend you watch that when it posts in 1 hour. Can't wait. Berries. Little pink with a little orange for more strawberries next to this blue. Orange and blue are contrasting colors, so this is going to bring down more of that contrast down here. And if you're like, well, strawberries aren't orange. Today they are. That's what's great about loose style watercolor is you can kind of just go with the flow and do whatever you want to. Strawberry on its side. Almost done. Make sure you guys post your work on Instagram and tag hashtag JR Art School and then tag me at Jenna Rainey. Oh, Kelly's on it. So I'd love to see what you guys painted with me today. bring in some more pink apples down here. So this, I'm pointing next to that corner because I want to lead people in a diagonal from pink to pink. And we're bouncing that pink throughout the whole piece. I also want to hit that blue for that fun bleed. It's actually easier to teach in person because I can see the problems people are having or the questions people are having, and know what to tell them to fix by looking at their work or how they're holding the brush or they're mixing the color or whatever. I love teaching online, and it's definitely still very effective and fun, but it's just easier to really help out the students when I'm in person because I can see maybe what they're doing that isn't working for them. It's just a totally different vibe and energy too. So right now I'm basically talking to myself, even though I know you guys can hear me. It's just kind of weird to just like talk at a camera and not even talk at a camera because the camera is pointing down. So that's strange. Yeah, even just watching the process of the painting is super informative for beginners and people learning to paint like this, because then you can kind of see the decision-making process and that it's all about, you know, shapes and color. So we've got that nice C curve right there with this berry starting up here and then leading into there. We've got this kind of S curve. We started to form an S curve. It was going to be a C curve, but now it's an S curve, which is totally fine. Those are great just shapes to have for floral or berry pieces for composition, just creating motifs, smaller motifs within a big piece like this. Then we've got kind of a C curve happening here, a little C curve here. And then we're just going to add in some filigrees with these berries. Looks like summer savories. I know, I'm ready to eat all the berries. Berry. And a few more leaves. Some yellow. Orange. It's funny when you ask us questions, I almost expect to hear answers. That's funny. I mean, this is very meditative, so this is making me sleepy too. So I feel you. Let's bring some strawberries up here. Little heart. Now we're just adding our little remaining details. Maybe another pink moment down here that's super bright. We got a lot of bright pinks up here. Whoops. So I need to bring it back down. Boom. Okay. Then the last little details, and I'm only going to show you a few so you can do it on your own after this ends. But to make these look even more like apples, I like to grab burnt umber and a touch of black And I'm just going to land my brush on the apple just 3 to 5 times for a little teardrop shape for the seeds. Land, land. And I'm not really placing them in any particular spot. I'm just kind of pointing them inward a little bit. Maybe some seeds are darker than others, but the point of the seed is up towards this flat edge. Like that. And then another thing you can do is with your blueberries, you can grab a dark blue. So I'm going to mix Prussian blue with Mars Black. And then go back over these lighter berries, so the ones that are lighter values, and just add 1, 2, 3 dots or 4 dots. No, I don't mind using black. Definitely not. So this would be called wet on dry because our berries are dry. And so we're adding another wet layer on top, another detail on top. You can do these to all your light berries or just a few, just make sure they're staggered. Because this is kind of like the base or the little where the blueberry has a stem usually. So it's there you have it, guys. A full fruit piece using the color knowledge that we have that we talked about in the beginning of this video. We talked about color theory. We talked about analogous color palettes, contrasting colors, and bridging the gap between colors to have a really peaceful and easy transition on your viewer's eyes. Let's move this up. There we go. And what else did we talk about? We did a value scale and a hue scale with watercolor. So we learned how to combine 2 colors gradually to do this fun exercise with just using pink and phthalo turquoise, opera rose and phthalo turquoise. And then for some of them, we added orange. Some of them we added brown, and we got a whole slew of color. And this is a fun kind of muted color palette or pattern that can be used on products if you're into licensing like I am. And yeah, so I really encourage you to go watch that color study chart video that we have on my YouTube channel. It's a really good one for practicing color and color mixing. And then again, in 45 minutes, this galaxy piece is being posted on the channel. So it's a tutorial on how to paint this exact piece. So if you want to learn that, this is really easy, very therapeutic, great for all age and experience levels, and just really fun piece to paint. Any other tips on composition other than the zigzag? So think about if you're doing a really dense and really dense piece like this, just think about little motifs as little paintings. And so you want to create C curves or S curves with all of those little motifs. So if you see me pointing right here, I'm creating this C curve with this cluster of apples, clementines, and lemons, but the curve is really happening with those berries. So you can make a lot happen with your composition with filigree moments with these berries. And so making that into a C curve, I made this next section an S curve. So the berries are over here and then they curve in and then out. We have a C curve here. And so we're always making sure our color and our shapes are landing in a zigzag but also what's helping move the piece along is these little moments of curves with our motifs. So thinking about color and then also curve with your C curves and S curves. I hope that made sense. We'll definitely be repeating this after your stream. Watching you work in real time made such a difference. You're so sweetie. Thanks for everything, and have a great rest of your weekend, everyone. That's so sweet. Thank you. Do you do anything to seal your paintings? I don't, and that's just because I never have. But I've had paintings on my wall for the last 8 years, and they haven't faded. But I wouldn't be the best person to ask for what to use to seal them because I've never done it. So no, I don't. Looking forward to the Galaxy video coming online soon. Thanks for the lesson, Jenna. Thanks so much. This was delightful. Thank you, guys. I'm just looking up the chat to see if I missed any sort of questions in the chat. If you do have questions, I'll be on for another couple minutes so I can answer any other questions about color or composition. Thank you so much. Beautiful work. I just want to encourage you guys that this is a really, it seems like a really complicated piece, and it can be frustrating because it does require a lot of patience, and it requires a state with your mindset that is different than what we're used to. So we're used to, using our decision-making and processing and analytical side of our brain to decide where to lay certain things on a piece of paper. But when you enter into your flow state, you can really turn off all of that analytical and logical decision-making action that's happening inside of your brain. And that's when the magic starts to happen, and you start to see these shapes kind of pull forward for you before you even land them on paper. I know that sounds woo-woo and a little bit weird, but it is something that it's all about your mindset, and it's all about turning on some good tunes, relaxing, and just trying to get as much into the process as you possibly can so that you enter into that flow state. Because when you're relaxed and you're not overthinking, you're really going to start to surprise yourself with what you're capable of. I do have an entire course on licensing, Laura. So it's called Brand Plus Brand. If you go to my website, jennarainey.com, you'll find my entire online course on licensing. And I taught it with my licensing agent. I also have a lot of podcast episodes on licensing. So you can go to the Jenna Rainey Show on any podcast playing platform. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, etc. And you can listen to a lot of episodes on licensing. And yeah, thank you guys. Thanks so much for joining this live. This is our last class of JR Art School. We are definitely going to be doing more art camps like this in the future because it was just so much fun. And so stay tuned for a schedule of when we're going to start doing these more often, probably once a month or once every other month is what I'm thinking, because it's so much fun. It's been a lot of fun these past 4 days. So if you didn't see any of the other days for JR Art School, they're linked in the description of this video. So they were live videos just like this, but you can watch the replays. They're all long. They're all in-depth actual classes, free virtual art classes. So make sure you go watch the replays. Thank you all. You've been so wonderful over these last 4 days, or even if this was your first video you tuned in on. Thank you so, so much. I'll see your practice and your work on Instagram. Make sure to tag hashtag JR Art School and then tag me at Jenna Rainey so I can see what you practiced from this video. And you guys are rock stars. Love it. Keep practicing. Happy painting and have a great rest of your weekend. Bye, everyone.